Have you ever felt that the moment you begin to grow, the people around you start shrinking away? When you begin to change, truly change, not just on the surface, but from deep within, something strange starts to happen. You notice the shift in others. They may not confront you directly. Instead, they respond with playful jabs, advice disguised as concern, or that uneasy silence when your conversations dive beneath the surface. But beneath all that, the truth is painfully simple. Your mental evolution unsettles their comfort. And people will do anything to protect their comfort zones. Maybe you're going through that exact phase right now. You've started questioning what once felt absolute. You're beginning to act differently, speak differently, even think in ways that your old self wouldn't recognize. And with that shift comes isolation. You feel judged, misunderstood, perhaps even abandoned. What no one warned you about it. What Nietzsche understood better than most is that building a truly strong mind comes with a cost. It's not just strength for show. It's a strength so raw, so grounded in truth, that it shakes people at their core. Because here's the unsettling reality. A powerful, independent mind is a threat. Not to everyone, but to the mediocrity the world has quietly agreed upon. Nietzsche saw this clearly. When you begin to think for yourself, when you strip away the comfortable illusions of socially accepted truths and start creating your own values, you become dangerous. Dangerous to the system, dangerous to others who are still stuck, and most of all, dangerous to your past self who lived in silent compliance. This video isn't for the comfortably numb. It's not for those who want sugar-coated truths or quick fixes. It's for you, the one who's teetering on the edge of transformation, the one who's had enough of feeling imprisoned by self-doubt, by fear, by the expectations of others. This is a challenge, a call to arms. Build a mind that no one can break. Forge a mental fortress so powerful, so untouchable, that it terrifies the very systems designed to keep you docile. If you're still watching, it means you're ready, or at the very least, curious. Curious about walking the lonelier road, the harder road, but the one that leads to real freedom. The kind of internal strength that cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. The kind Nietzsche himself chased not through comfort, but through chaos, because Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a soul surgeon. Someone who stared into the void, not to escape it, but to dive in and return with truth. And it's in that very abyss, that internal chaos most people run from, where he found true strength. He once wrote, "You need to have chaos inside you to give birth to a dancing star." That wasn't just poetry. It was psychological truth. You will not become powerful by avoiding pain. You will not become unshakable through cheap motivation or empty affirmations. True strength arises when you stop begging life to be easy. It begins the moment you stop running from your own darkness and choose instead to sit with it, to learn from it. And this is just the beginning. Because once you stop asking life to go easy on you, something incredible starts to awaken within. In the next part, we'll go deeper into what it truly means to master your mind, by controlling the world around you, but by mastering the chaos within. Are you ready to go further? Let's keep going. You've already begun to feel it. True strength isn't born in ease, but in chaos. Think back for a moment. When did you grow the most in life? Was it during moments of peace, when everything flowed effortlessly? Or was it in the darkness, when you were shattered, lost, and forced to rebuild yourself from nothing? That raw, painful process, the confusion, the solitude, the failure is where Nietzsche saw the roots of real transformation. He didn't view suffering as a flaw in existence. On the contrary, he saw it as its very engine. Nietzsche never tried to romanticize pain. He looked it in the eye and recognized it for what it was, a brutal but effective tool. And here's the key: when you shift the way you see pain, when you stop avoiding failure, loneliness, or emotional wounds, you begin to cultivate something the world rarely understands, an unbreakable spirit. And that's when you start becoming dangerous not to yourself, but to the system. Because while most people run from the fire, you start to walk through it. While others plead for comfort and predictability, you learn how to carve out something extraordinary. But that kind of transformation doesn't come gently. It demands a sharp, sometimes painful break from everything you've been taught about strength. Being strong isn't about always smiling or pretending to be calm. Real strength is when you survive the unbearably and return sharper, wiser, and more composed than ever before. Still, Nietzsche knew that chaos alone wasn't enough. Without an inner compass, without something to anchor you, chaos can crush you. That's why, in the next part, we enter one of the most controversial chapters in Nietzsche's thought. The moment he kills God. It's here that he hands you the full weight of existential responsibility. Because once there is no higher power to turn to, the responsibility for creating meaning, purpose, and direction falls squarely on your shoulders. Are you ready to step into that space where the universe no longer speaks for you, and instead must be born from within you? Let's take that next step. When you embrace true freedom, you also inherit its burden. Once you strip away external guidance and abandon the idea of being saved, you stand alone with one terrifying but liberating truth. Everything now depends on you. There's no one left to blame, no more illusions of salvation. You either rise by your own hand or fall by it. And yet, hidden in this brutal autonomy is an awakening, a fire that lights up in the darkest corner of your being. Because when you finally accept that, no one is coming to rescue you, something inside shifts. You begin to think for yourself, not to please others, not to follow rules, but because you've chosen your own path. You start to act, not out of obligation, but out of alignment with your own values. This rupture from all the psychological crutches you've leaned on us into the end. It's the beginning. A foundation is being cleared, prepared for something far more extraordinary to rise. Nietzsche saw this as the necessary breaking point before a higher self could emerge. In place of the passive, obedient individual, he imagined the rise of a new binger, rare type of person who no longer needs approval, who lives above the herd, guided solely by their own vision and strength. A being who doesn't follow morality, but creates it. A person who terrifies others, not through violence, but by being unapologetically themselves, because that authenticity forces others to confront their own illusions. Nietzsche gave this person a name, the Übermensch, or the Overman, and to understand how to build a mind so resilient that no one can break it. We must understand how to become this figure. Let's explore. Nietzsche didn't believe in gradual, polite progress. He believed in rupture, in destruction that clears the way for something new. And the Übermensch was not some mythical savior or superhuman. This figure was born out of pain, rejection, and isolation. The Übermensch is someone who has overcome all the smallness of the ordinary human experience: guilt, fear, dependence, the desperate need to be liked. This person doesn't conform. He doesn't ask for permission to live or think. He writes his own code and follows it, even if that means walking alone. That's exactly what makes his mind indestructible. It doesn't bend to the world because it wasn't built by the world. It doesn't rely on others to feel valid. It is complete on its own, drawing strength not from comfort or consensus, but from its own will to power its unshakable drive to shape life according to its own truth. That's the core. The Burmage does not adjust to life. He imposes meaning onto it. He doesn't ask, "Is this acceptable?" He asks, "Is this worthy of me?" That simple shift in mindset changes everything. Because the moment you start seeing yourself as a creator rather than a servant, your entire worldview evolves. You no longer react to your design. You no longer follow, you lead. You no longer seek belonging, you build wholeness from within. But this path comes at a cost. To become that kind of being, you must be willing to sacrifice the old parts of you that crave validation. You must confront the aching loneliness of standing apart. And you'll need the courage to bear the responsibility of defining who you are with inherited values, without group approval, without compromise. And that's where we're heading. Next, because the question isn't just how to become unbreakable, it's what you'll have to leave behind in order to get there. Let's continue. As we saw before, the higher your mind rises, the more you'll feel the pull of isolation. But here's the deeper truth, that solitude is not your punishment, it's your training ground, rebuilding yourself from scratch, with no applause, no external validation, and no map to follow, is one of the hardest things a person can endure. Most people will never get close. At the first signs of discomfort, they retreat. They cling tightly to pre-made systems, religions, ideologies, traditions, not because they believe in them deeply, but because uncertainty terrifies them. The unknown feels too heavy. Freedom feels too wide. So they choose comfort over growth, safety over truth. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He didn't just write about standing apart, he lived it. Misunderstood, ignored, and even labeled insane, he spent much of his life outside the mainstream. But ironically, it was in that very isolation, that silence, that rejection, where he found his clearest voice. Because when the noise of the world fades, your inner truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is what you must come to grips with. The stronger your mind becomes, the more you will begin to disturb those around you. Not because you're wrong, but because your growth challenges their stagnation. Your independence becomes a mirror, and many can't bear to look into it. The journey toward the Burmage, the higher self, is not just about building strength. It's about tearing down everything false first. All the values, identities, beliefs imposed by a society that fears individuality and worships conformity. Everything you thought was you, but was actually handed to you by others, must be possibly destroyed. Only after that painful demolition can something real rise. But that construction doesn't happen in public. It doesn't happen in group chats, or on stages, or under the eyes of mentors. It happens alone, in silence, in the quiet corners of solitude, where you wrestle with your darkest thoughts and come out stronger. That is the birthplace of the mind that cannot be broken. And this leads us to one of the most overlooked, damned, most essential parts of Nietzsche's entire philosophy, the solitude of the strong. Because to become truly unshakable, you must learn to stand alone, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Are you ready for that? If what you've heard so far stirs something deep inside you, consider exploring it further in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It unpacks Carl Jung's core insights, who, like Nietzsche, believed that true power comes from integrating your darkest parts, not running from them. You'll find tools there to help you understand your psyche more clearly and take real control over your inner world. The link is in the pinned comment. Now, here's something no one tells you about this path. The stronger you become, the lonelier it gets. Not because you're pushing people away, but because they no longer recognize you. You become harder to label, harder to manage. The world doesn't know what to do with someone it can't categorize. Nietzsche warned of this. The free spirit, one who breaks from herd mentality, who refuses easy answers, who dares to think for themselves, will, by nature, drift from the crowd. And yes, that distance stings. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder why it hurts so much to grow. But it's necessary, because growth doesn't happen while clinging to approval. You cannot stretch into your full self while shrinking to fit the expectations of others. Most people live in what Nietzsche called an invisible herd. Every word they speak, every belief they hold, is shaped by social pressure, by the invisible walls built around them. And those walls feel safe, predictable, familiar, but they are also a prison. So what does Nietzsche do? He drags you out of that comfort. He throws you into the desert, dry, vast, empty. No applause, no safety net, no one to follow, only you, your doubts, your memories, your pain, your dreams. And in that space where everything familiar has been stripped away, you find out who you really are. But what do you do when you're standing in that desert, completely alone? That's what we'll uncover in the next part. Because solitude isn't the end, it's where the real rebirth begins. Let's keep going. Once you've faced the silence and chosen to stay, the real test begins. Most people, when confronted with the weight of their own inner voice, will retreat. They'll rush back to familiar distractions, hide behind polished identities, and pretend not to see what the silence revealed. But if you truly seek to become someone who cannot be broken, you must resist that temptation. You must stay. You must endure the discomfort that strips away illusions and reveals your raw, authentic self. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual must always struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often feel lonely and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." And that is the essence of the journey, to possess yourself, fully and fiercely, because once you truly possess yourself, no one can define your worth. No one can manipulate your emotions, and no one can reduce your value to their limited perspective. You stop being a puppet to others' expectations and become your own authority. But this possession, this internal sovereignty, doesn't come cheap. It brings with it the heavy cost of loneliness. You will lose people. You'll become a mystery to those who once thought they knew you. You'll be labeled arrogant, cold, strange, distant. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. Because you're no longer playing the role they assigned you. You're no longer shrinking to keep their comfort intact. They will try to pull you back into their mold. They'll call you selfish, even crazy. But that's just the price of not being domesticated, of refusing to be a mirror for others' insecurities. When you don't need applause, when you stop living for approval, you become something unfamiliar, something threatening. Here's the truth most can't admit. If you can't tolerate loneliness, you're not ready for freedom. All real freedom requires a letting go of false security, of shallow companionships, of the need to constantly explain yourself. Nietzsche didn't see solitude as exile. He saw it as a sacred battlefield, where the real self, unburdened by social expectations, finally has room to emerge. But the journey doesn't end with isolation. In fact, it's only the beginning. Because once you begin to rise once, your mind becomes sharper, your boundaries stronger, your inner world more stable. You'll begin to see something that others cannot. A kind of fog lifts. You start noticing patterns. You notice how easily people settle, how often mediocrity is disguised as kindness, how quickly discomfort is labeled rebellion. And this clarity brings you to the next unavoidable challenge, the confrontation with collective mediocrity, because the moment you rise, the world starts to push back, not directly, not always through open attack, but through subtle resistance, through mockery, through isolation, through quiet judgment. You won't be persecuted by tyrants in thrones. You'll be quietly discouraged by those sitting right next to you, ones who want you to stay small so they don't have to stretch. And that is what Nietzsche feared most. Not external oppression, but the suffocating pressure of the herd. That invisible force that keeps everyone level, rewards sameness, punishes those who dare to question the norm. That corrosive collective mediocrity dressed up as moral correctness, humility, and loyalty. It doesn't ask you to fail, it asks you not to try. It doesn't destroy you with violence, it seduces you with comfort. It whispers, why change? Why question? Why be different? And if you're not alert, if you don't stand firmly in your new identity, you will shrink back. Not because you're weak, but because the pressure to conform is constant and quiet. But what happens when you refuse? What happens when you keep growing, despite the pressure? That's exactly what we'll explore in the next part, the moment. When your strength becomes a threat to the system around you, and how to keep rising even when the world asks you to dim your light. Let's keep going. You're not being attacked because you're doing something wrong. You're being attacked because you're doing something rare. When you start to rise above the noise, when your presence alone becomes a challenge to the norm, the world doesn't celebrate, it resists. Because you're breaking the mold, and society has always feared those who don't fit inside it. Collective mediocrity can't stand individual brilliance. Why? Because your growth shines a light on everything others are trying to hide. Your strength becomes a mirror that reflects their stagnation. And nothing is more uncomfortable than being forced to confront one's own smallness. Nietzsche called this resistance the product of slave morality, a system created by those too afraid to reach for greatness. Unable to rise, they rewrote the rules. Strength became arrogance. Ambition was renamed selfishness. Independence, coldness. In their world, virtue was just weakness, repackaged to make mediocrity feel noble. But don't be fooled. This wasn't compassion. It was resentment. A quiet, corrosive resentment toward those who dared to stand tall. So when you begin freeing yourself, don't be surprised by the backlash. It won't always be loud. Sometimes it comes in sideways glances, sarcastic remarks, or long, awkward silences. Sometimes it hides in friendly advice meant to bring you back down. The message is always the same. Return to the group. You're making us feel small. But what you must understand, what Nietzsche understood, that this reaction says more about them than it does about you. Most people live in a cage built from fear, guilt, and blind obedience. Anyone who challenges that cage threatens the illusion of safety they've built their lives around. The tools of mediocrity are subtle. They don't attack you with truth. They attack with numbers, with consensus, with repetition. They try to wear you down by making you feel alone, strange, and wrong for not conforming. They weaponize shame and exclusion, and it works on many, because the pressure to blend in is relentless. That's why so many give up. They don't want to be labeled the difficult one, the arrogant one, the ungrateful one. But Nietzsche would have given you a different name, necessary. Because while the world spins on recycled thoughts, cheap desires, and pre-packaged truths, it is the rare individual, the strong one, who brings disruption. And in that disruption, transformation is born. Your difference is the spark that sets stagnant systems ablaze. It threatens everything false. That's why it attracts so much resistance to think freely, to live independently, to hold your own truth in a sea of noise. These are not passive acts. They are revolutions. And like any revolution, they require preparation. They demand you be armed, but not with weapons of destruction, with mental weapons, clarity, discipline, self. And that's what we're going to explore in the final part of this journey. Because while there is a heavy cost to building a mind so unshakable that it frightens others, there is also a reward waiting on the other side. Reward no one can take from you. If you've come this far, you're already ahead of most. The majority would have clicked away the moment the message became uncomfortable. They would have flinched when their ego was challenged. But you stayed. And that means something, because this isn't entertainment. This is a call to let go of the comforting illusions that keep you asleep, to open your eyes and face the world as it is, with unwavering clarity. To build a mind that cannot be manipulated is not just a goal. It is a renunciation. You will lose things along the way. Friendships that were never rooted in truth. Opportunities that required submission. The ability to tolerate shallow conversations and petty drama. But in exchange, you gain something priceless. Integrity, stillness, presence. You begin to see things others miss. You notice how asleep most people are. How your lucidity makes them uneasy. How your silence echoes louder than their noise. This kind of strength isn't taught in motivational seminars. It doesn't come from positive affirmations or social approval. It is forged deep within, all in the quiet battles no one sees. In the nights, you choose truth over comfort. In the moments, you walk away rather than shrink for someone else's ego. True strength doesn't declare victory. It simply keeps going, even when it no longer has to. Nietzsche didn't want followers. He wanted internal earthquakes. He wanted you to stop begging for validation, to stop scavenging for meaning in hollow systems. He wanted you to become dangerous, not violent, but rare. So rare that your very presence forces others to look inward. And now, I want to challenge you to take a step further. In the comments, write something true that you've been afraid to say. A thought that isolates you. A belief that makes others uncomfortable but feels real to you. Let this be your moment of declaration. A refusal to keep hiding. A statement of presence. And if something in this video stirred something in you, don't stop here. The next video is not just a continuation, it's a deeper descent into everything you've just awakened. If you've stayed with me this far, you already know this isn't about curiosity. It's about transformation. You're not alone. You're just ahead. And while that may be frightening, it's also the beginning of true freedom.